those digital health applications that are prescribable by the public healthcare system and are reimbursable. That has been in place since a couple of years now, and we want to have a closer look how that works. So if anybody of you joining here today might have an idea of saying, wow, digital health applications are reimbursable and we get the money from the public healthcare system. That is a cool thing. Let's build a digital health app and get it reimbursed, and then we get filthy rich. Um, Good idea. We want to have a closer look at how this works and what the chances are really of you getting filthy rich, and what you have to do to do that. Before we dive into the topic, Kate already mentioned a couple of words. A couple of words on myself. I originally came out from pharmaceutical and medtech industry. I started in my very early days working for Roche and Roche Diagnostics. But since about more than 20 years now, I'm more and more doing digital health. In various positions and various functions with various companies. I had the chance to work with Kate and Dimitri Constantas in the Netherlands on two glorious European Union projects, where at a very early stage we built remote patient monitoring systems. And I think we were among the first ones who actually built patient monitoring systems working with sensors, measuring different physiological values, using Bluetooth to transmit them then to a backend, and then for medical personnel to have a look at that. I eventually started my own company a couple of years ago, Digital Health Partners. We're based in Munich in Germany, and one of the things we're doing is we're helping digital health startups to get together their go-to-market plans. We look with them in building their business strategies, as well as their networks in the different markets, amongst them being Germany, to get well established. So that's in a nutshell about me. Let's see what we are doing today. I'm trying to switch to the next slide, which does not work. Hang on a sec.
And we did test it
I just
before.
tested it 2 minutes ago.
Right. That's what
Here we go.
Bravo.
Here we go. Okay, there is hope. So what do we want to have a look at today? This is about digital health applications, about those ones who are reimbursable within the DiGA scheme in Germany. So what we want to have a look at is, what does it take for a digital health application to qualify as a DiGA? What are the steps and requirements you would have to go through? If you have a good idea for an app, and you say, okay, I want to go there and I want to get it reimbursed in the healthcare system, what do you need to do to actually arrive there? Then, of course, we want to shed some light onto how these things are implemented in the German healthcare market. Did they really arrive in broad care and broad therapy? What are the achievements to date, and what are the obstacles and challenges? And there are a couple of challenges that remain. I don't know what this thing is. Hang on a sec. Yeah, I have to do it like this. Then we want to, the market entry is one that, of course, DiGA facilitates. And we want to have a look at other alternative market entry possibilities or strategies. There are alternative market entry strategies. If you still want to get it reimbursed, then there are other entry strategies. Then sustainable business, an important issue, although that these things are reimbursable. It's very important to have a look at the business model that you are, applying, because reimbursement is not endless, so there are ceilings, and it is very important to realize, how do I build my business model to get it sustainable and not, running out of money in the long term. And last but not least, Germany has been at the forefront. They've been the first ones to establish such a program. What are other countries doing? And how does these programs compare to the German approach? Okay. Righty ho. Where are we today? Where are we coming from? DiGA has been launched in September 2020, so it's been like 5 years, a little bit more than 5 years that you can actually register and be prescribed and reimbursed. In the beginning, that was kind of a funny thing because neither patients nor doctors actually knew what to do with it, which is a little bit illustrated by the picture on the right side. So it says, my doctor has prescribed an app, one in the morning, one in the evening. So, people say, prescribing an app, what does that mean? I'm used to be prescribed drugs, but, prescribing an app, how should that work? How should that work? That has changed as we went along. You will see that later on. Today we have 59 digital health applications registered under the DiGA scheme, so they are reimbursable. We are a little bit coming down, or at least plateauing. I think we had about a year ago or so, we had 62. So there are, apps going in and apps going out, coming in and going out. But we will have also a look at why this is stagnating a little bit. Anyway, we have 59 at the moment, which is quite a bit, and which makes us well ahead of any other countries. If you ask those people who actually use these DiGA applications, who've been prescribed DiGA applications and use them, they are giving a quite favorable feedback. So if you ask them, did that really improve your quality of life? You have 62% saying yes, indeed. Did it improve your health outcomes? Still over half of it, 56. And did it contribute to you understanding and managing your disease? Almost 70%. So that is quite encouraging. So if you ask the users, those people who've been using DiGAs in the past and are still using them, they are quite happy with how the things are working and are quite happy with how these apps support their daily life and support better living with the disease. Having said that, there has been criticism and there is still criticism from doctors' associations and the payers regarding two things, basically, regarding cost benefit and proof of evidence. Cost benefit, like, you have doctors saying, well, if I do an X-ray, I get 20, 25 euros reimbursed. Why do these guys who supply apps get 300, 400, 500 euros per quarter? That is not fair. So there is this discussion. And then proof of evidence, as you will see as we go along, there's a so-called fast track approval, which limits the amount of evidence a DiGA needs to provide to get listed. Now, there are a couple of people on the payer and the provider side who say, well, you need to provide full-scale clinical studies. And of course, this is kind of not fair or not good because, if you do that, you would block basically new things from getting on the road because a full-scale clinical study takes you years and years and years. But there are these, points of criticism from doctors and payers. So it's not a very good world and everybody's positive and happy about it. Patients are happy in general, but there's criticism. That's all I want to say here. So you have to be a little bit critical when you look at the whole thing. If before we want to continue, I think it's important to say what is a DiGA at all? We're talking about digital health applications, but what is the difference between DiGA and digital health application? Well, a DiGA is something which is officially registered in the directory of the Federal Agency for Drug and Medical Products to be reimbursable. So there is this registry, and if you want to be reimbursable, you have to be in that registry. Question is, how do you get in there? Basically, there are three things you would have to fulfill as prerequisites to get listed as a reimbursable health applications. First of all, you have to have a CE mark. It has to be a medical device. We'll come back to that later on. That is a difference between a wellness or a fitness app and a serious medical device. So a wellness and a fitness app can't be registered as a DiGA and being reimbursed as a DiGA. So it has to be a medical device according to the medical device regulation, the MDR, which is in place across Europe. And there are different risk class, 1 to A to B for DiGAs. And we will see again what that means, but you have to go through that certification and you have to get that CE mark. Unless you have that, no chance. The second thing is a quite obvious one, that the application has to be built, its main function has to be based on digital technology. Well, that's a no-brainer. It's no good to say, wow, I have a fancy new whatever infusion device or a new inhaler that has nothing to do with digital. So, it has to be built around digital technologies. The third one is an important one because you have to prove that you support health and positive health outcomes and healthcare effects. That means that a DiGA is per definition something which is patient-centric. So it has to have that positive healthcare effect. Either you can show a medical benefit, something like a symptom improvement, or you can show an improvement in care structures and care processes and the care journey. So if you can do that, then you're all right. But you have to prove and show evidence that in that you can basically improve monitoring, treatment, alleviation of diseases, as I put it there. And it has to be diseases. You cannot say, I'm introducing a digital health applications for the general improvement of whatever. It has to be disease specific. And it has to be the treatment. It has to be detection, monitoring, and treatment. You cannot do prevention. That is not doable at the moment. Maybe in the future, but not at the moment. So, in a nutshell, these three things you need to have to bring along in order to apply for being listed as a DiGA and for being then part of that directory that enables reimbursement. Okay. We have to say, okay, what is a DiGA now? The question you can ask, why the hell did the German health authorities decided 5 years ago to introduce digital health applications as being reimbursable? Because there's been a lot of critics, there's been a lot of, wow, we are the first, and shall we actually dare it? And they did. Why did they do it? Well, you can, of course, say, it's always, because they had the patient in mind, because patients say, okay, we want to do good for the patient. We want to, benefit the patient with a better treatment and a better care. But that has not been the single argument for the healthcare system. I think already 5 years ago, the healthcare system or the government realizes that the system has serious problems. And these serious problems are certainly true for Germany. But these serious problems are also true for other countries, for other westernized industrial countries, some less, some more. In Germany, by now, 5 years later, as we are today, they've been really becoming burning issues. And one of the points the government at that point in time has been like, okay, one thing we can do to make the system more efficient is to introduce digital tools. And just, to make you understand what these pressures on the system are, this is these things are listed there on the right side. So we have an aging population in Germany. So like those people aged 65 or older, that cohort is strongly growing. So, that's a serious demographic challenge that we are talking about. Another thing is physician shortage. So you have not enough doctors anymore. That sounds funny for countries such as Germany, but it is like this. The shortage not so much in the big cities, but especially in the rural areas. There are parts of northeastern Germany close to the Polish border where people have to travel, I don't know, an hour to see a general physician. I'm not talking about specialized physicians. That is even harder. But general physicians, are in rural areas have become scarce. that's a huge problem. Then, of course, the whole mental stuff, the psychotherapy, especially after COVID. A lot of we have seen a lot of more people in need of mental or psychological support. Now, the thing is, there are not enough resources on the psychotherapy sites available. So we have waiting times from, I don't know, 4, 6, 12 months before people can actually get therapy. And that is, of course, a serious thing. If you really have a person, suffering from a serious mental condition, how can that person wait for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 months is? So again, the idea was if we had digital tools to bridge that gap or even help people to better manage their depression, for example, that could alleviate that challenge. That all leads to rising costs, and Germany spends around 12.5, 12.8% of on healthcare of our gross domestic product of our GDP. And that is, having said that, that is probably one of the most expensive healthcare systems in the world. The US Americans are probably still more expensive, but 12.5 to 12.8 is rather high, and it's still increasing. Germany spends almost 600 billion euros per year for healthcare. And then, of course, you might say if this goes on, the system is not sustainable because you cannot increase insurance rates until end of days because at one stage people are not able to pay for that anymore. So we have a serious sustainability risk. And these are the things where the government said, yeah, well, we have to do something about it. And as I said, um, launching digital tools or trying to put digital tools into the healthcare system was one idea they had. So here we come to the objective launching DiGAs, which is
Can
said
I
that
ask a question?
yes,
Just
sure,
because I can see from your slides, can you just tell us and historically, because the first DiGAs were in 2021.
yes,
So it was, but also the whole reform, the whole approach of German government was before COVID, I think. It takes long to establish,
yeah,
and
yeah,
once it has been established, then the COVID hit. So it's interesting to know it's not just from one day to the other, but also that it was not triggered by COVID, if I understood correctly.
no, no,
No,
no, it was
but
not.
it was coincidentally around this
Yes,
time, and then
COVID, yeah,
it.
COVID was hitting us. I don't want to say it's a perfect storm, but it was hitting us already at the time where the system was under stress.
Mm, mm,
And
mm.
that even worsened the whole situation.
Yeah. So I'll just also say that Swiss system also has a similar spending, so around 11%, and like the forces you have indicated they are quite universal. One thing sorry, if you may have it later or right now, you can point out: is there a unique electronic health record system or like healthcare system in Germany, or was that was that something which facilitate or not, and the funding model, private, public. Yeah.
There is one after years of discussion. I think there is that, and I know there is one, and I think that from this year onwards, from 2026 onwards, it's even compulsory. So
Mm,
if I go
good.
to a general practitioner, I can say I want to have an electronic patient record. Um, the, the thing is, what is in there and how the data is structured. And that is something that still needs to be improved. If you want to, I mean, it's okay if you put a PDF document into an electronic patient record, you can have a look at it and the doctors can have a look at it and say, okay, this person has been treated with XYZ before or with another doctor. That's good, but there is no vaccination data, for example. That is still not in there, something like that. So not everything is in there, but that is coming over time. And if you look at your K data analysis, point of view, it has to be structured data. And you cannot do a proper data analysis with PDF, as you know. So that is then again also the next step, because
Thank you.
you want to use the electronic patient record, of course, for the benefit of the patient and the doctor, but also for statistical purposes, for anything which comes to steer your healthcare system, to
Exactly.
feed into artificial intelligence, anything you need to have that data. And yes, we do have an EPR, but there are still things to do in the future.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So objectives. We had seen that there are healthcare challenges we see on the bottom left side. And the question is, how do we get an improved system? And as I said before, the idea was to use digital tools. There are other things you should do to improve the healthcare system, like structural things, like stopping the work in silos, from ambulant to hospitalized to home care. We are still working in silos, and people are not communicating, across these silos. So, for example, that needs to change. But one tool, as everybody agrees, is you use digital tools. And there are studies that have been made by the big consulting companies such as McKinsey. They're saying, well, if you use digital tools properly and thoroughly throughout the system, you have a savings potential of 40 to 50 billion euros in the next 15 to 20 years. So, one tool is implement digital tools. And, why this is another thing why DiGA has been launched, but the government said, this is of course our objective to really get into the system. Germany is not very receptive to digital tools, and the government said, yeah, but then we force it more or less, or we make it reimbursable, and then everybody has access. So, what in detail, you can say what 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 was the plan? Which elements did they aim at to be improved with the DiGA? Personalized care is one of that aims. So with an app, you can of course personalize your support according to your wants and needs and your daily life. So that personalization was one. They said, a digital health app should enable that personalization. A second thing was proactive care. If that app is able to detect deterioration, for example, well in advance, and prevents you to slip into any critical situation in your chronic disease, then of course that's a great thing for the patient and for the system, because you can, for example, avoid hospitalization if the app at the early stage says, hang on a second, be careful, you need to do something, because we have seen XYZ happening. The third thing was what they expected was patient empowerment. So long discussion, I think, everywhere in the world. How can we, support patients to take more responsibility of their own health? And the idea was then, if the patient has that app, and is that app encourages or enables him to self-management in a better way, he would take more responsibility and empower himself or herself. Resource optimization. Again, we have scarce resources in many countries. The idea was there to say, if that app prevents, for example, hospitalization, we can, of course, handle these scarce resources in a better way. And finally, what we just said, digital adoption in the market. So how can we integrate digital tools in the care pathway in a good and efficient way? So these were the objectives when the government sat down and said, yes, we want to, launch this initiative and make it reimbursable, make the system more efficient by simultaneously providing better care, stable care, better care to patients, right? Um, I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, difference between wellness and fitness apps and a medical app. So, you don't have to confuse the two. Um, so what's the difference? I, put together a couple of features here. In general, I think what's important to bear in mind is the distinction is not so much about technology as I put it there. It's about the purpose and the use. So you can have, I'll give you an example. You can have the same app, like an app that tracks your steps and measures your heart rate. It can either be a fitness or a medical app. If you use that same app for just, you know, monitoring your fitness when you're jogging or when you're doing physical exercise, that's a wellness app. If you use that same app for a person that suffers from heart failure, for example, where you say, heart rate measuring is critical because, if I do not that, risk the patient going into deterioration of his condition. That then is a medical app. So you see where I'm getting at. Does the app influence clinical decisions? Yes, then it's a
Yeah.
medical app. If it just helps you to stay fit, then it's just a fitness app. And that is basically that is very important to remember. So it's not about technology alone, it's about how you're going to use, in which context and for what purpose you're using that app. Um, as I put it here, the fitness app is for general health, lifestyle and fitness, medical devices, diagnosis, monitoring, and treatment. Regulation-wise, the fitness app it's a consumer product more or less. So you have to show, okay, that it's safe and secure, that you're not burning patients or otherwise hurting people, not patients. But otherwise, it's very low regulations. The medical device is medical device regulation compliant, as we have seen. Clinical evidence is not required, but very well required if you do a medical device. There's no risk classification for fitness app. There is for
Mm.
medical device software 1 to 3. Uh, Fitness app obviously targets the general population and the medical device patients or certain patient groups. Claims allowed, improve fitness, track activity, whereas you can put forward clinical claims in the medical device thing, reduce symptoms, treat condition. And usually you don't get reimbursed for fitness apps, but you may get reimbursed for medical device or software medical device applications, for example, under the DiGA scheme in Germany. So here
Mm.
we go. That's the difference between a wellness and a fitness app. So if you think about building an app, make your mind up, saying, do I want to stay on the very easy wellness side, or do we want to dive into the more complex medical device side? Completely different business models, completely different ways of constructing your organization, of building your product, of getting funds. Your business models are all different, but you have to be aware of where you want to go and make a decision where you want to go. It's no good to stay in between or to build a fitness app and claim afterwards that, this is a medical device. You cannot just do that. You have to plan that from the very, very beginning of your journey.
Can I ask you something? As I was
Sure.
investigating once again, every year I'm updating the DiGA knowledge, kind of looking at this database, online
Mhm.
database. I'll post the link to everybody. You'll see how many apps are now there. And I have impression some of them they did start at like in the fitness area, and maybe there was a research project as the basis, and then they went further because, as you said, in order to be in the DiGA, in this database for reimbursed applications, they had to become a medical device. But for some of them, I was really looking what's the evidence and when did they start it, and maybe 2 or 3 out of 10, which I investigated at the beginning, I found research projects and research teams which started this particular research. So I mean, no, maybe I'm not for sure I'm formulating wrongly that they started as a fitness app, but they started slowly as a feasibility study of some kind, and then they become a medical device. And most likely, you may have a view as expert how many years does it take to get from one end to the other, and then like you have to start somewhere, and maybe it's a fitness app or somehow a general public app.
Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
come to the timelines and the costs later on.
Okay.
Um,
Perfect. Sorry. Yes.
but the
Okay.
point I want to make is, of
Yeah.
course, you can say I start as a fitness app, but changing then your internal processes, your certification
Yeah.
needs
Exactly.
may be much more costly than if you
Yeah.
do that right from the
From the
start.
beginning.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying that
Thank
it's
you.
impossible, but
Thank you.
I'm saying that it may be a more painful journey later on if you
Okay.
if you don't do
Okay.
that.
Okay, so maybe I was more questioning from perspective of evidence. You have to start somewhere where there is not yet a medical app, for
Yeah,
sure, and
yeah,
then it's some
yeah,
kind of app, and
yeah.
then you get into. Okay, perfect. Sorry, I'm already so enthusiastic about learning about
No, 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 no.
everything. So
Ask. I mean,
yes,
everybody ask
yes,
questions if you like.
yes, yes. You can
That's
put the questions.
why I'm here.
Okay, we
Okay,
continue. Thank you.
here we go. We're looking at, we talked about this medical device regulation, and we talked about that you need to certify according to these medical device regulations. So here are the different classes. Um, if you want to go for a DiGA, it's either class 1, 2A, or 2B. 2B. Class 3, that's the highest risk, that is excluded. So you cannot enter a DiGA with a class 3 because that is just too risky. The government, actually thought, I think. So let's start with class 1. Class 1 is the lowest risk class. You can kind of self-certify. You can certify yourself. You have to create evidence, but it's on a kind of low level, and it's relatively fast and at low cost. In terms of cost, and that is average cost, and average duration I put there. It's on average 50K, and you can do that in half a year, but still quite well doable. So class 1, we are talking about applications which have a supportive functions, which have no or very limited influence on diagnostic or care decisions. These are applications that are informing patients or users, that are typical applications are like diary things, like you collect data and you store data and you may inform people, but they are really low intervention apps with no serious direct influence um, on diagnosis. One example is like we have an application in DiGA called Mika, which is a coaching app for people suffering from cancer. So that is a pure coaching app. It has no direct influence on the cancer therapy, but it just helps people live with their cancer in a better way. So that's the easy thing. Class 2A. Class 2A is a class which medium risk is, and that, by the way, is the sweet spot for a DiGA application. Most of DiGAs are in class 2A, actually. So, as I said, we're talking about medium risk. You cannot self-certify anymore, but you need to go to a notified body that does that certification. Um, you have to create evidence. It's no full-scale clinical study, but you have to create some evidence to sustain your claim. And again, then of course that is more costly. We're talking on average about 170K to 200K. We're talking about 15 to 18 months to go through that class 2A application. So these are typically applications that actually do intervene with therapy. So they have an influence on therapy. Um, they they have you have to prove the clinical evidence to a large extent. They are therapy relevant with a lower risk. So if anything goes wrong, it doesn't kill people, straightforwardly. Um, so these are a lot of these mental or applications that treat mental conditions are in that class 2A. For example, Kate Depraxis, that is the application which Switzerland will launch in July. That's a good example for a class 2A application. It has it is based on cognitive behavior therapy, so there's a scientific basis for it, and it actively intervenes into a depression therapy. So it actively says, okay, dear patient, you have to change your therapy, or you have to adapt your therapy, or you have to change your behavior. So you have a much higher influence on therapy than in class 1. Okay? So class 2B, there are a few applications that are in class 2B at the moment in DiGA. So there we are talking about, of course, a higher risk, as you might have guessed. Uh, we are needing much more strict clinical data. which are strictly reviewed by good clinical practice and controlled trials, for example. And of course, the costs are higher and the average duration to do that, let alone the clinical trials, are longer. So that takes you longer than 18 months. Anything, I don't know, depending on the clinical data you need. So these are typically applications that have a strong influence on on clinical decisions and may have really a critical impact. So if in these in this class, if anything goes wrong, it might have a serious impact on the patient and on the therapy. So we're talking about a certain high risk here. And these are products that are going towards clinical decision support systems, really, at the end of the day. Um, and I said I only know of one app that is in the DiGA directory, which is called, I think, Esysta, ESYSTA, which is an app that manages diabetes, and it's kind of an insulin dose advisor. So you imagine if that thing advises you to take the wrong insulin dose, you might be in trouble, right? But as I said before,
Yeah, yeah.
if you want to go to DiGA, it's either class 1 to A or to B. Just for you to know, 3 is really something which is, for example, a hospital clinical information or clinical decision support system, which is really hard stuff, which you wouldn't go anyway as an app supplier. You wouldn't go there. These are usually the med techs and the health IT companies who actually, go for these kinds of solutions.
I will give an example as I was sometimes giving example in where teaching was that closed loop system for insulin
Yes.
injection. So like artificial pancreas, directional
Yeah.
artificial pancreas when it measures the continuously glucose and injects the insulin automatically.
Mm.
It's very high risk, number
It's a
three,
high
and I
risk.
think one,
Yeah.
one of them is named nicely Guardian. I think Guardian
Mm.
system by one of these companies. But
Yeah.
yeah, rare, yeah, exists.
Yeah,
Thank
but
you.
anyway, I mean, the costs and the risk and the investments are usually so high that you need to have big companies behind that. I would never do that as a small company.
Mm,
All right.
thank
So here we go again with another set of standards. Don't want to discourage you, but we've just talked about certifications that you need for your product, i.e. your app. Um, if you go for a medical device, you would have to certify your quality management system as a company internally. So this is why I call most of these things internal standards. And here you have your ISOs and your IECs. Um, so be aware of that. Somebody comes around and says, "Yeah, okay, how does your organization look like? Are you working in your organization according to the quality standards we need for you to produce a medical device?" And of course, you have your ISO 13485, which is like your basic quality management system inside your organization. Then you have ISOs and IECs for standardizing your development process, your security, your evidence generation, the whole process of obtaining clinical data, and so on and so on and so on. So there are standards for your organization to work according to the latest quality standards that assure the lawmaker and the government to say, okay, this is an organization that is able to produce critical, in inverted commas, critical medical devices or medical products. So on top of your your device certification, you're talking about medical device regulation here, you have to be aware of those ISO and IEC standards for your own organization. I don't want to go more into detail. I'm not the expert myself into all of these,
you.
things.
Yeah,
But and going into there would need a specialist and would take I presume a whole session on itself. Um, but they are there, and you have to look at them.
and I have just information we have code for one of the projects, Shield, actually, which is
Yeah,
sponsoring
yeah,
this
Shield.
webinar. It's we met our colleagues at the data center of University of Geneva, where our servers are, because the question was, are we going as a University of Geneva collaborator in the European project towards a medical device? From perspective of basically coaching application for type 2 diabetes, obesity, and cardiovascular disease. And then I'm smiling because the person who we have met, he's a beautiful person, engineer, who pointed out that he himself worked as the quality assurance quality assurance QA in Merck, right? Merck, in the division where they were evaluating the pumps, what was that? The growth hormone pencils, sorry, not pumps, but pencils. So we have really discussion about medical device in which he was as a software engineer working for a few years, and now he's at the University of Geneva, and he's telling us that the University of Geneva infrastructure do not have this particular how do we say standards? Yeah, standards
Okay.
yet. But if we get, especially me, as in different projects with quality of life, we've now 4 or 5 running projects. If we really want, he may be able to help, but definitely we'll need to get feedback from his bosses and a lot of other people at the University of Geneva to understand if they help us to even try, how do you say, host this particular backend and the infrastructure for this particular medical device, which we are aiming at. So to make a long story short, the ambition was very high, and my ambition is still very high. And then coming back and also meeting the clinician, we realized we are not able to meet the standards in such a short time of the European project lifetime. However, in back of my head, I was like, one day it's going to happen. And well, but the University of Geneva, he pointed out, like, for example, for instance, like the quality management system, ISO 1348, 485, he pointed out a few things, and it's like, well, we do not have, we're getting closer. We can be able to help, and it would be possible, but right now it's not the right now. So
Interesting that the University of Geneva says that.
but he said he worked in the company on this side. He knows what's expected. He said just it's a lot of documentation.
Yeah, no.
It's a lot of internal processes which needs to be aligned. And then again, he's a beautiful person who wanted to help. And then it's kind of me. I was like, right now for risk management for the Shield project and others, we said no, we're not going for it. But it's interesting to know that one day I would love. I would
Mhm.
love.
So, I mean,
Thank you.
it looks like a lot of work, which obviously it is, as you say, but I mean, it's doable. I mean,
Yes,
there are 59 app providers, almost all of them small companies, and they
exactly.
did it, and they successfully did it. So, I want to say it's doable. It may sound hard, but it's doable. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any.
Exactly.
All
Will be
right.
one day. Thank you.
Okay. So, it all we have talked about the bits and pieces. Now I want to summarize the whole process. I would like to summarize the whole process and show you, how that works, uh, and how the different, framework conditions and items are around that process. So, as we have seen, if you want to have an approval as a DiGA, it starts with the medical product certification, class 1 to A or to B. That's something we have seen. This is something you need to certify according to the European Medical Device Regulation, MDR. So once you have obtained that, you can go to the Federal Agency for Drugs and Medical Products in Germany, and BfArM it's called, and say, okay, guys, this is the app. We have obtained MDR certification, let's suppose 2A. So we are secure, we have high quality, we have approved functionality. Now we want to apply for a DiGA, for being registered as a DiGA. Now the agency will turn around to you and say, fine. However, you would still have to prove your positive effect on quality of care, which means you show a medical benefit or a benefit in terms of treatment structures and processes. Right. So you might or you might not have that data or that evidence. If you have it, and the agency says, fine, we are all fine with it, then you have a full-scale listing. You have a permanent full-scale listing for the DiGA registry, and you are reimbursed. If you don't, or if your data set on the quality, on the positive effect of quality of care is not enough, then you have kind of a proof period. You have a provisional listing for originally it was 12 months. In some cases now this has been prolonged to 24 months because people said sometimes it's tough to get the evidence data in such a short time. Anyway, this is kind of a pardon thing. The agency says, well, the thing looks good, but you still need to supply some evidence. But for the time being, we give you a provisional listing and we give you 12 to a maximum of 24 months to supply that missing data. But still, you can get reimbursed and prescribed. So, like you're fine for the moment. You still have to do some work, but you're fine for the moment.
Mm.
Then, as far as price is concerned, and this is why I put the negotiation into inverted commas, that first step isn't really a negotiation because as an app provider, for the first 12 months, you can claim your own price, which is cool. And you can say, okay, I want to have per quarter 500 euros. The whatever the payers will say, damn it, this is bloody expensive, but this is the way the cookie crumbles. For the 12
Mm.
months, you will have it. And you will see later on. I mean, the most expensive DiGA at the moment is one for multiple sclerosis, which costs over 2,000 euros per quarter.
Wow.
Wow.
Per patient.
Per patient. Per patient. So, but the good thing is, and that has been, of course, much criticized by the insurers, is that during these first 12 months, you can actually claim a price. You wouldn't be able to say it costs you 50,000 or whatever, but within reasonable limits, you can say, okay, this is what I want to have. Then, after the 12 months, you would have to negotiate with the roof organization of the public health insurers, the GKV, and that's where the problem starts for some of these application providers, because then prices are dropping usually because GKV negotiates very tough. They say to you 500, not doable anymore, you get 250, something like that. And that is we have seen that in the past can be a challenge for application providers. And we have seen some of the application providers who have been there for 12 months needed to go out because they were running out of money. And this is why I say you have to take this into account that you have to think what happens after 12 months. If my price is lowered significantly, do I still survive financially? If I think I get 800 euros until the end of days and I'm confronted with 400 or 500, if that kills my business case, then I'm gone. Which is something that happened to some of these providers before. And
Is the price? I'm sorry, because now it's linking to quality of life evidence. Can you negotiate higher price and say, no, I'm still getting the money because I can see how much impact is this on people's
of
life?
course, yeah, of course you can always negotiate, Kate, but the question is,
Okay, I see.
question
I
is
see.
how much you can get. I mean, if you
Yeah.
negotiate well, you have a better price, of course, but usually you're not getting the price you have been stated in the beginning.
Okay, but I'm just saying that it would be great to have a data to really support the negotiation.
Yeah, if I don't know
That's
what happens if you say I have hardcore data which shows that the healthcare system saves per patient X amount
okay.
of money.
Okay. Yeah.
That is not
Thank
mandatory, and honestly, I don't know to what extent
you.
the app
Okay.
developers have done it, but that's perhaps worth a try. If
Okay.
you can
Thank you.
prove, if you can prove that you're saving more than you cost, then of course you're on the safe side.
Thank you. Okay.
Challenges
Okay.
for the app developers. Documentation needs, as we have seen, for MDR classes 1, 2A, or B. Then there is the necessity to create additional evidence data. Then there is price limits after the 12 months. So, these are the challenges you have to be aware when you go through that process. Okay. And by the way, this is called a fast track approval process. And you see that the Federal Agency for Drugs and Medical Products actually had the goal to decide within 3 months of your application, which is super, super fast for German standards. If you're going through any registration process for a drug or for a device, usually it takes you months, but that is super, super fast. It is not
Yeah,
anymore true because there are other technical demands coming up, but like until now, they are really trying hard to keep this in 3 months.
bravo.
Okay. So I try to translate that into an overall kind of Gantt chart, or you may call that an amateur Gantt chart. So let's suppose you're going for a class 2A, in a nutshell, that is your timeline and the different steps. So, all the main things there, the regulatory strategy, the QMS, your product development, the clinical evaluation or clinical study, documentation, notified body, audit, and submission. And that, of course, depends on the clinical data you need to supply. That is always the critical time thing. But anything between, I don't know, 15, 18 to 20 months, something should be reasonable. If you do it well, that is your typical development and go to market case from a process and from a timeline point of view. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Registration was one thing. Now we look at the patient side and see how a patient gets hold of a DiGA prescription. And that is not as easy as it is with getting a prescription for a usual drug. So the way it goes at the moment is you have a disease which there is a DiGA for. Let's suppose diabetes, or you have a heart disease, right? Then you go to your healthcare provider, your doctor, and say, um, if you know that, can I have this DiGA? Or I know that there is an application that supports me. Can you prescribe that? If the doctor knows about it, the doctor will say, there is an application that might serve you well in supporting you during your management of that disease. Of course, that, you know, needs the doctor knowing about it and the patient knowing about it, which is still kind of a challenge, I have to say. More and more doctors know about it, but in the beginning it was hard because doctors said, "Hey, DiGA, what the hell is that?" I don't know anything about it, but that has been improved. So then the doctor issues the DiGA prescription. The patient takes the prescription, which is still a paper-based prescription, and sends that prescription, like it scans it in, the patient scans it in or takes a picture or whatever, and sends that, or even by mail, sends that prescription to the health insurer, to his or her health insurance. Then the health insurance has a look at it. Usually it sends a registration code. In the beginning, that was kind of a long thing. By now, the registration code should be there within a week or so, usually. Then the patients got the registration code, and then the patients can use that registration code to start working with the DiGA, right? And then we go. So, um, as I said before, it's a little bit more complicated than the usual drug prescription process because in Germany, like even in Germany, we have e-prescriptions now, so it's a no-brainer. I call my doctor and said, "Look, I need this X amount of whatever," and he puts it on my health card, and then I just go to the pharmacy, and then it's done. I know that the authorities are working to include DiGAs on the e-prescription side, but that is not there anymore. So you can imagine the whole thing is a little bit complicated. There has been a problem in the beginning because, as I said here, many of the healthcare providers, doctors are not aware and were not aware of prescribing or are not motivated. That is less of a problem at the moment, but it's still there. Patients do not know how to send that to the health insurers, especially older patients. And say, how do I send this and to whom do I send it? And then once they receive the code, some people have forgotten about the code or, have lost the code or whatever. And at the end of the day, we had at the beginning very big problems with adherence. So patients stopped using the DiGA, especially after the first month or so, because they thought, it's not helping me. And um,
We have a
people,
question.
yeah, people are
Yes.
leaving me alone with the usage, and I do not get any support. Yeah, your question.
Span, I'm trying to unmute you.
Yeah, thank you very much. You started to answer my question. It was exactly about that. You were working in the pharmaceutical industry, and for molecules, the payment for molecules is directly dependent on perceived efficacy from patient, which is linked itself to adherence. And we know that digital tools has a problem with adherence, or that it's an important issue that companies should address. And so, are there discussion? It means also that it is costly for a system to pay a fixed amount for a digital tool that would be used only once or two times. Are there discussion about including metrics of adherence for
Mm, yeah.
regulating this payment?
Good
Mm,
question. Very good question. Um, there are there are metrics that need to be included now for measuring usage. Yeah, so the app provider has to provide a usage statistics, which is, as far as I'm concerned, not enough because what do you want to do with user statistics? You end up saying, we have 20% patients quitting usage after the first month, something like that. What do you do with it? There's no data on why people actually, quit usage, or there is um, still no program that supports patients using digital tools. I will come back to that later on. And I know that, the lawmakers and everybody and other stakeholders have seen that you cannot just give a digital tool to a patient and leave him or her alone. You have to provide support to this person, which in the beginning was not paid by anybody. The lawmaker said, we
mm,
pay you for the app, but we don't pay you for a support through whatever, tool that might be, a call center or whatever. Um, that was not paid. So app providers did not offer that in the beginning. Now people have realized that, it's not good enough to just drop a digital app onto a patient. And, it's in, that is in the process of being changed. And I think we're going to a situation where that part of the treatment will be reimbursed, the support part, I mean, where even telemonitoring may be reimbursed as part of a DiGA. And
mm,
I've heard discussions that this is underway and that there's going to be a change of law as far as reimbursement is concerned to include that and make it kind of a hybrid care approach. So you have a mix between the digital app as such and a personal component of support. And I think that is needed. That is one of the learnings out of the first couple of years. So to answer your questions, absolutely, you need to have an understanding of how many patients use it, of why patients use it or not use it, and you have to kind of offer kind of a concierge or support system to those patients. And I think that is coming.
thank you.
In France, by the way, that is, come back to that later. In France, by the way, that is doable. And I think in Belgium also. So they were cleverer than the Germans in the beginning, saying, we need to include that. Okay.
Thank you.
There's another thing briefly. Since April 2025, as a patient, you can directly apply to your health insurance to you get a DiGA code. But that is kind of painful because you have to supply medical documentation and a proof of medical necessity. And I don't know how many patients will actually do that. That is kind of funny. And I think that's kind of okay, you can do that, but I don't know that I don't think that many people will be using it.
like self-prescribing almost.
Kind of, yeah. I mean,
Improving. I'm going to benefit from it.
yeah. So, I mean, no,
Interesting role of health insurance. I'm sorry, I missed it last time when we discussed it. Or let's like, are there showstoppers? They could be showstoppers. Do you know if there are statistics of refusals, or
no,
it's just smooth?
I don't know. In general,
Mm.
they don't refuse. I mean,
Oh,
in
it's
general,
prescribed.
they, are very at a very low rate. In general, if the health insurer says, this is prescribed by a doctor, the health
Yeah,
insurer says, okay, the doctor needs to know what's best for the patient, and he has a reason to do that, so they won't challenge the doctor's decision. Usually, they don't do it.
thank you.
It's rather in the beginning it was the problem that they can handle it quickly enough. Um, so
Okay,
much more of a logistic problem than a credibility problem. Okay.
mm, great. Thank you.
Okay. How many apps do we have in the registry, and what are they for? As I said, we have at the moment 59. 50 have permanent certification, and 9 have like this uh, pending recognition because they still have to supply some evidence data. But in all 59, and this is how these 59 allocate themselves to different conditions, disease conditions. You see that the large majority is in mental and psycho diseases. We have 29 out of 59 dedicated to mental health. We have 6 for urogenital. We have nervous system with 4. We have tinnitus 2. We have irritable bowel disease 1. We have 8 for, pain problems, muscle problems, back pain, and so on. We have metabolic disorders, that is obesity and diabetes. We have 2 for cardiovascular, which is heart failure and hypertension. And we have 2 DiGAs for breast cancer. The interesting thing, this is why I highlighted the psycho thing and the metabolic disorders, is that the number of mental DiGAs are by far, bigger than any other, clinical indication. We have 29, as I said. However, if you look to the usage, how many people are using DiGAs in any of these clinical indications, it's metabolic disorders. Funny enough. So not funny enough, but interesting enough. It's metabolic disorders. That is the area where we have the highest usage of DiGAs. And this is true because of one single application, which is called Oviva, which is an application for managing obesity. And this is probably has to do something with all the weight loss injections that came to the market a while ago. And people have realized that weight loss injections are good for losing weight quickly in most cases. But if you stop using them, you gain weight again. And the point is that an injection should help you to lose weight, but you have to do something in parallel to change the way you live and you eat to make it sustainable. Otherwise, you gain weight again, and you have gained nothing apart from weight. So, this is why why doctors started to prescribe this Oviva app, to say to patients, use it because it supports you to change your eating habits and your lifestyle, and make your weight loss sustainable. That's the only reason. So funny enough, that is what pushes DiGA use, or has pushed DiGA use to a very large extent over the last couple of months. Is interesting, eh?
The support, yes. And there was one with wearables, because when I was studying for obesity and when I was studying, as I said, I studied 50 of them at some point. I was looking into one which has also weavings, which was an audio. I don't know if it still exists. It was one of those, which is also looking for wearables aspect. Anyway, interesting. Thank you.
Looking at a little bit the timeline, so I have to hurry up a little bit. We have seen that the number of new DiGAs is a little bit slowing down. So we are kind of plateauing. Why is that? So three reasons mainly. We have two new technical requirements. This TR whatever is a regulation that came into existence a couple of months ago, which looks at increasing data safety and security. So it looks at access control, authentication, software update certification needs. There's been a lot of criticisms from DiGA providers, from app providers, and I'm sure that, this is changing again, but it had an impact on people saying, wow, not again, this is an additional burden. Then we have outcome measurements. That was the question we had 5 minutes ago. There was a law which requires app providers to measure usage and only usage. So they have to say how many people are using, how many people are not using, when do they stop, but they are not asking why. So people say, well, statistics is nice, but what do you do then with the figures? And so that has to be that there will be change in getting evidence and user statistics as we go along, I'm sure, over the next couple of months is. And all of that has shifted timelines a little bit beyond the 3 months to 6 and 9 months, and that of course is putting a little bit of pressure on new entrants as well, because the approval timelines, giving the new requirements, has shifted a little bit. So the government has to make sure. I want to say the government has to make sure that the good idea of having this fast track process, this easygoing fast track process, is not damaged by additional requirements that actually hinder the idea, which was a good one in the beginning. But I'm sure this is going to change, as I said. We talked about people stopping using DiGAs, or the adherence problem. Just very briefly, I'm sorry about the thing on the right side. I couldn't find an English translation. These are the details of why people actually have stopped. The top reasons I summarized on the left side. People said, I stopped because the app did not meet my expectations. I did not perceive any improvement of symptoms, or I was feeling better anyway, so I didn't need it anymore. So the premature discontinuation, as I said before, you could address that by adherence management, and I think that those people who are in charge of legislation have realized that you need to do some adherence management and support people. Otherwise, you don't change adherence in a positive way. What can you do in times of adherence? These are packages which have been implemented by some of the health app providers, so and by service companies. Funny enough, so there's a basic patient support, which helps people to transport the prescription to the health insurer and make sure that they get the code and everything. Patient Support Plus also goes into the same direction, helps users to redeem their registration code. So the first two are really about logistics, getting the prescription, fulfilling the prescription with the health insurers and getting the code. The patient support, the patient concierge support on the right side is really what you want to get at. So that's your concierge. You support your patients, you either with a personal contact, with email, or a contact center. You do motivational support and motivational follow-up. And this is, of course, very costly. And some of the app providers are struggling with that. There are some service companies who actually implemented offering that service, and we see that the lawmaker is going to include that into reimbursement, at least partially into a reimbursement, so that will be less of a burden on the shoulders of the app developers and app providers. But it has to be there, otherwise, you cannot just throw a digital app onto a patient and say, no, just run with it, and we don't care anymore. So you cannot do that. It's a little bit of statistics for the supporters and the critics, as I put it there. So is it the glass half empty or half full? Up to you to decide. We have since 2020, we have 1.6 million prescriptions or 6 million codes being dispatched to patients. Yearly public health expenditures for DiGA in 2025 was 171 million. Compare that to the 59 billion of drugs. That's of course still peanuts. It's about roughly 0.3% of drug expenditures, if you compare it to the drug expenditure. So people are complaining about higher costs, but in terms of the total drug expenditure, it's still not much. Conversion is around 70%. So that has been up quite a bit. So 70% of people actually receiving a code to actually use it and use the app. Continuous usage for DiGAs for 90 days, and app is always prescribed for 3 months, for a quarter. 75%. That has significantly increased. I think we were at 60% in the beginning, something like that. And only 25% of people actually discontinue then using DiGAs. Again, we were substantially higher in the beginning, so that figure has come down. So we're going to a more positive picture when we talk about adherence and continuation of usage. Average reimbursement price, we briefly talked about that. We have an average price of 540. That is before the 12 months period, dropping to 229, 230 after. So you see there's a significant drop when this 12 months period during which the provider can establish his or her own price, there is a substantial drop. And you have to be aware of that, and you have to take that into your business models, as I said before. The most expensive DiGA is Levidex for multiple sclerosis, 2,077 euros per quarter.
I was just checking the last application quickly. It's about cognitive behavior therapy in multiple sclerosis, role-based AI-driven conversation, tailored interactive therapy experiences for lifestyle management, including stress reduction, physical activity, and diet.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Summing it up a little bit, guys, before we look onto other countries, summing it up a little bit, what's going on in Germany. The picture on the right side illustrates a little bit what we need to do if we want to, progress further with digital health applications. What I want to say is that you should not use a digital health application in an isolated way because it might completely misleading. It needs to become part of the patient's overall care and therapy regimen or journey. I'll come back to that in a minute again. We talk about HTA and so on, Kate. And so you cannot just sell it as a standalone thing. You need to include it in the overall care. So you're having a diabetes app, you're controlling diabetes, and it brings you data or suggestions or any other thing. What does that mean for the whole therapy? It has to be part of the whole therapy. It cannot be used as a standalone. You shouldn't do that. Patient support, we talked about that, needs to be integrated in the future. Telemedicine, teleassistant, in terms of offering then a hybrid or blended care. That has to be really put on the road. Otherwise, again, as a standalone, it has its limitations. Outcome and technical requirements need to be adjusted. Usage statistics are not useful. Data security needs to be de-weaponized. You need more than just pure user statistics. You need statistics on behavioral patterns and so on and so on. Security, Germans are obsessed about data security and data safety. Often this is used as a weapon to actually hinder innovation. So we have to, again, also as far as DiGA are concerned, to a practical, more reasonable approach to make sure that data and applications are safe and secure. Awareness, knowledge, and motivation on the healthcare professional side. Many, as I said, a number of doctors still don't know, how to deal with DiGAs, how to prescribe. So that is kind of a communication job or a marketing job. And then the DiGA prescription process, as we have seen, is still a little bit complicated, needs to be simplified. So yes, I want to say yes, DiGA has to some extent arrived in the German healthcare system. It is there, people are using it. So what do we do to take the next step to drive it further into overall care, to make it become an integral part of patients' care and therapy journey? And this is what needs to be done in the future to drive that whole story further. Germany has made a tremendously courageous decision to go for it and reimburse it. But and that has been a good step, but you need to work on it. And as with many things, you need to have a look at it after all those years and say, how do we do with the shortfalls? How do we deal with the shortfalls? And what do we do to drive it further? And then I think as I said, I'm very optimistic this is on the way and people are thinking and discussing it. It's like, the toothpaste cannot get back into the tube, but it's already out, and people are realizing that's already out and it's working, and they will be there to improve it. I'm sure. Right. So let's look quickly at other countries. France was the first country actually who followed the Germans on DiGA and that reimbursement scheme. They called it their system PK. PK is in a nutshell, it's very comparable to the German system. It is not yet there in terms of implementation and structured processes. Germany has 59. I think France has 5, 8 apps, not more. So they still have to work a little bit on, getting it on the road. Approval risk classes, the French can do all. You can enter with the class 3. I don't know if that's reasonable, but it's there. In both countries, you need an MDR certification. Reimbursement is there with the public health insurance. Amount of reimbursement at the end of the day in Germany negotiations, the French have said max 780 per year. There's a deadline for permanent listing, 12 to 24. In France, 12 months. So again, similar. Both countries have a directory or registry for applications. Approval points, clinical benefits or structures improvement. Same thing, almost same thing in France. Electronic patient record is the perspective, so you would have to make sure that at some stage it's going to be integrated in the electronic patient record system in Germany, same as in the INS in France. Mon Espace Santé as a patient portal or as a patient registry. You need to make sure, I think, in the long run that it works with these things. The prescription process as such needs to be a little bit defined or refined in France, as I said before. But, again, the French, followed the Germans, and I think they are going down the same line. It would be nice if the two countries could act together and harmonize. We had the case in the past that there has been a DiGA which has been approved in Germany and disapproved in France. So, these are things where I say, guys, it would make sense to have a harmonized rule and regulation for these things across different countries in Europe. And we had this meeting, I think, in the French embassy in Paris last year, where both the German ministry and the French ministry said, yeah, we are working on it, but would make sense, but I think that's still a little bit far away.
There is a question before I
Yeah.
continue. First of all, I wanted to say I posted links to DiGA and PK and just realized that Vincent Verkramer, he was at WeThings. We're not telling anything, but it's a device developer in France, and he's right now directeur de projet in santé numérique. So very good hands. The person who was in CTO or high level position at WeThings He's right now on the other side of the evaluating the whole process.
Okay.
And then there was a question is about from Anastasia. For regarding the slide addressing the barriers, could you elaborate on what effective motivational support for patient looks like in practice? Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
motivational support for, for patients. Um, I think, motivational support is something that is an area of psychology study on its own. How can you motivate patients to use something, which in that case is an app? I think you have to understand, first of all, ideally, if you want to do it really well, I say, if you don't want to really do it well, you have to understand what the patient needs. What are the motivators of that patient? Um, and these might be different from patient to patient. If, for example, a patient has a problem of structuring his day or her day, um, then you need to motivate him by providing him structure. You motivate him or her by saying, yes, you do this and then you do that, and congratulations for that achievement. That was great. If you have another person who has a problem with his eating habits, then you have to motivate him in a different way, or her.
Mm.
All I want to say is that motivational therapy or motivational approaches are a personal thing. You have to understand where the pain point of the patient is, which you can find out if you go to your usage details and the feedback the patient provides. And you have to adapt then your motivational approaches or initiatives according to these different wants and needs. And that has to be, you can do that motivation with messaging. Ideally, you do it with a personal intervention, like once a week, where you call the patient and say, how have you done? What have you achieved? Well done. Go on like this and continue to engage. Um, you can always say, I'm developing a standard program for with motivational things, but then, of course, this might work or not work. If a patient has completely different needs, then you don't reach him or her. So I want to say that there is, I'm always in favor of personal intervention, to say I'm personally talking to a person. I understand his wants and needs, and I can motivate him according to where his problem is or where his needs are.
Swan, go ahead. I hope you can. Shall I unmute you again? You can, I hope.
And of course,
Yes.
of course,
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
there's this whole area of cognitive behavioral therapy,
Exactly.
which tells you how to do that. But that's a research area in itself, cognitive behavioral therapy. And if you
Yeah.
dive into that, you can design your motivational programs based on cognitive behavioral therapy. But that's a different lecture.
Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I had a question related to France. Besides PECAN, which is the equivalent of DiGA, France had first prioritized funding digital tools for improving process for healthcare professional. That was a temporarily law, the law 51 from Assurance Maladie. And so I was wondering first, how is the discussion evolving around DIPA, which is the equivalent uh, in Germany? Is it going to be opened? And more generally, I'd like to hear your thoughts from a public health perspective. Are there emerging evidence that patient outcomes may benefit more from improved digital tools that are easing the work of professionals compared
Mm.
to digital tools that are addressing patient needs directly? Thank you.
Mm.
Yeah, good
Thank you.
question. DIGA is only addressing the patient side, right? You cannot say, I'm trying to register with a digital application that helps the clinicians, only the clinicians. And that may be a difference to France. In Germany, it has to be patient-centric, right? And of course, you can speculate around what kind of tools and applications do I provide to doctors, especially those working in the hospitals, to have more time for the patient? Because then you can say if the doctor has more time for the patient, it is of course then a benefit to the patient at the end of the day, whereas the doctor has to do less of administration work or less of whatever. And there are solutions, clinical decision support solutions, workflow solutions that are used for helping doctors and care personnel to achieve that. But that is something which is completely out of DiGA. That is a different story. And the whole program we have in Germany to drive digital innovation in hospital, which is called KHZG, it's a different legal initiative. Sort of that's a law on the future of hospitals, which funds the hospitals and doctors to use IT to alleviate them from tasks and to make their decision faster and quicker, like medication systems, clinical decision support systems, point of care systems. Yes, that is done, and that is a different source of funding. And I think everybody agrees that if we do that and if we provide more time to the patients, that of course does a lot of good. But again, that is something different. It is done, as I said, but it's completely out of the DiGA range.
Mhm. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Where are we? Belgium was another country that was following Germany. They have this kind of pyramid, which kind of looks the same. It has a bit of differences, but kind of looks the same. So MDR, medical device regulation, they also need. Then they need compliance with data protection and interoperability standards in the Belgian healthcare system. Then they have a provisional approval, and of course, then permanent approval, where you have the evidence of clinical effectiveness, socioeconomic benefit, and integration into a care concept. The difference, if you like, is that this provisional period in Belgium is applicable for 3 years and not for 12 to 24 months like in Germany. All MDR classes, including 3, can be reimbursed. Telemedicine solutions are eligible, so that is the part that we just seen that is not yet there in Germany. So that support part, which can be a telemedicine part, can be reimbursed. Socioeconomic benefit needs to be proven. In Germany, we don't have the economic notion so much so far. So we have the quality of care benefit and the quality of process benefit, but not the economic benefit to be proven or to be part of the approval system. And then the integration into existing care pathways is much more important in Belgium than it is in Germany. So again, I think that's a very wise decision to take, to say, okay, to what extent can we integrate digital applications into clinical care pathways, which needs to be there. And this is why I think this is a very wise thing to do for the Belgians to start right from the beginning. What about Switzerland? We mentioned that the Swiss are starting with one application in July 2026, which is DiGAs. That is an application for treatment of mild to moderate depression based on cognitive behavioral therapy. That is already a DiGA in Germany, and so there is no such thing as a standardized scalable reimbursement scheme such as in Germany. So the Swiss are looking at it, and I think they are just trying it with DiGAs and see how it goes. But as far as I know, you may correct me there, Kate. There is no standardized scheme as we have in Germany or in France or in Belgium.
No,
No,
not yet. I want to believe that not yet. Yeah.
Not yet. There are other countries such as Denmark or Austria which are building such a system. There is, I think, even in the US, Medicare for mental health is building such a system, but the other countries, are kind of still looking to as what shall we do with it, or shall we do anything with it or not? To sum it up, if you say, okay, I want to have this, I have this idea of building a medical app, and get it reimbursed and get rich, These are maybe the 6 fundamental things you would have to take into account. You have to have a scientific model, for example, a cognitive behavioral therapy thing. You need to have the clinical evidence. You need the approval and the certification. You need to assess its value. I'm coming back to that with my last slide in about a minute. You need to look at cooperation and interactivity. So how do I work with payers, with care providers, with investors, and so on? It's wise to say I do that in the early days and, kind of do a co-development with them or actually include them in the development process rather than being in my own ivory tower and not asking anybody. And you have to be, the app has to be open and inclusive, open to contain a number of features. So you cannot just say, I'm just, having a diary function. It's nice, but it might not be enough to say, okay, I'm there to manage diabetes, for example. So look at, what kind of features and functionalities a diabetic patient needs or another patient needs, and then you have to take care of that. So, these would be the 6 most important things for me to say, yes, I want to build an app. What are the things that I need to make sure I have to make it happen? Entering the German market, you can of course enter other markets, or you can of course enter the German markets, with an app talking directly to a health insurer and do a single contract with a health insurer rather than going for a DiGA status. That is the question you have to ask yourself. Shall we aim at obtaining DiGA status or, doing a selective care contract with individual health insurers? That is much more flexible, but and the health insurer may become your actually go-to-market partner. That is not to be underestimated. The down thing is that you only have that one health insurer, right? If it's a big one like Technica or AOK, you have a couple of millions of patients, but that selective contract is, as it says, a selective contract, and you have just that one health insurer. Okay? Then another thing, sorry, another thing, your business model, does it fit into the reimbursement scheme even after the 12, especially after the 12 months per period? So something we've seen before, we've discussed before, you have to be aware that your price is going down after 12 months. Can you take that financially as a company, or are you then in trouble? Evidence, we have seen that quality of care, certifications, MDR. If you don't have it, do we invest in creating evidence? And we all have seen the time, resources, and the money you need for that. How do you want to invest in creating the evidence? Can you do that on your own? Have you got the money? How do you get investors to do that if you want to go down that way? Which part of the healthcare system do you want to target to access the market with that app? Is it inpatient care for hospital or is it ambulant care? In Germany, it's not a good idea, for example, to work at the intersections of both. So if you go to the healthcare system and say, well, I've got this wonderful app that if a patient leaves hospital, that patient will be monitored. Nobody will pay you because there's payment for the hospital sector and there's payment for ambulant care, but there's no payment for the middle thing. So not a good idea. Value proposition, does it fit to the target's interests and needs? Another example, it's not good to go back to the hospital and say shorter lengths of stay, outpatient monitoring after discharge, because this might not be in the interest of the hospital. And then finally, who could act as my go-to-market partner? With whom do I work to facilitate my market entry? Go-to-market partners can be hospitals, health insurers, stakeholder organizations, opinion leaders. So, as I said again, it's wise to talk to all these guys in the beginning to ideally include them into your development process, into your go-to-market process, because of course you can involve them. You have their opinions and their feelings and their ideas in the past. Not in the past, but you have them as you go along, and you have them in the boat right from the beginning. And as we said, business development budget needs to be in place. This is my final slide. Again, and this is a strong point which I want to make at the end of this thing is suppose you have a great idea for an app or even a DiGA. And you say, gosh, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get rich. This is going to be a success because I'm convinced that it does good for patients. You have to ask yourself, do I invest my own money? Do I spend my own money on developing the app? How are the chances to convince investors and bring it to the market? So you have to sit down and really seriously think about what is the value of your app? Is it really worth investing in it? And if yes, how do I convince investors? Because you're going to need investors because it's going to cost you a lot of money. Apart from the fact if you're being born filthy rich or immensely rich, you don't need that, but most of you actually need it. So how do I do that? That is a thing which we called health technology assessment. And health technology assessment is quite a simple thing which determines the value and viability of your endeavor of your health app. And it's kind of very straightforward, but it's often underestimated. And I know a lot of app developers by now who haven't done this right from the beginning. You have to do it right from the beginning and then have huge problems. The first step is you have to understand the system. You have to understand the stakeholders and the actors and the system in the healthcare system you want to go. So you have to understand, what are their roles and responsibility? How do they behave? How are their dependencies? How do they interact with each other? You have to understand the system. You have to understand the patient pathways, the clinical workflows, and especially the payment flows. And that is very important, this understanding part, the first two. If you have an app that you think does a good deal of benefit to the patient and helps the patient a lot, that does not mean that the healthcare system will use it because it might be too expensive for the healthcare system. It might be that there is no payment scheme within the healthcare system. It might be that certain groups in the healthcare system, such as doctors, don't want to use it because they have different interests. All of that may lead to that good idea to get stranded and fail in the market. Other things such as, do I have the data really to substantiate my algorithms with it? Is it legally possible? Is it in accordance with data safety and security? All of that you have to ask yourself. You have to understand your system to be clear and sure that you can actually introduce it. I had the case of one startup recently who said, I've developed this great algorithm to predict, to actually measure people in their posture. Like you have a person standing in front of you, and you have this system that analyzes the posture of that person, and the system allows you to say, this is where the problem is. This is where you're going to have your problem with your back or your knee or whatever in the future. And this is what you should do about it. And these are the exercises you need to do about it. Great idea. However, orthopedics and other doctors have invested a whole lot of money into equipment that actually does this. This measures your posture and your movement in a more analog way, and that costs a lot of money. So how do you want to explain to that doctor you can throw away that incredibly expensive equipment, and I come along with my app and I tell you what to do? The doctor will say, now go away. I don't want to know it. I don't want to use it. I'm not going to use that. So this is a typical example of you have to understand how your stakeholders are behaving, how your system is working to make sure that the innovation really fits and has a value, which is then famous point number 3. Is that really an improvement in terms of doctor benefit, patient benefit? Is there really role for this improvement in routine care? And only if you've gone through that exercise, I think you can be pretty sure then after all to say, okay, this is worth launching or not launching. And of course, but this is again a different lecture. There are methods of collecting data. You need to collect a lot of data to understand that, of course. And you need to do a good deal of analytics to create that evidence, which is Kate, again another lecture. There are these methods. That is what we teach in the executive MBA thing. To get hold of the data and analyze it. But this may look trivial. This may look trivial, but don't underestimate it. As I said, I've met many startups and app providers who just said, great idea. I'm convinced that this is a great idea. I'm going to spend my money on it and develop it. And they, at a certain point, realize that the system is not able or not up to use it, or that the innovation is not hitting needs or whatever. And then the whole thing goes down the drain, and you want to avoid that.
Wonderful. And we are almost right on time. And I very much appreciate everybody staying in. It's 2 hours lecture almost. And well, do you have time to stay a bit longer if anybody would like to continue discussion, which could be then recorded and posted? But anybody else, if you need to leave, or you can also leave us questions in the chat. Very much appreciated. And your last point is what I'm trying to emphasize more over and over also to students and collaborators. It's not anymore build it and they come and they pay you for what you build. It's also related to a lot of qualitative work at the beginning, what matters for patients and other stakeholders. And then also, as you pointed out, also getting into economic evaluation of what who pay. Is that I'll then chain it with the question about prevention, because is that particularly the reason? Because there is no code for reimbursement for prevention. You think that somehow the prevention apps are not yet appearing or not yet on the standards? Because
it should be appearing. By all means, it should be appearing. And that is one of the sad things in the German healthcare system, and I think in other healthcare systems as well. We are not doing prevention, really. I mean, prevention.
I think nobody's doing prevention.
Yeah, I mean, you can do with the tools we have, with the data we have today, we could do a lot of good prevention, personalized prevention.
Yeah.
We could actually see this is a person XYZ, and giving his biomarkers or whatever, his lifestyle, he has a risk of developing XYZ. That's all we can do. We don't do it.
Yeah.
And, you're talking about prevention a lot of times, but printing a brochure and reminding people of eating healthier or doing physical exercise, that's fine, but it's not enough. I mean, if you want to do serious prevention, then you would have to do it much more in depth and much more individualized. And that is unfortunately not happening. And I don't know why people don't see it. You can prevent so much costs and so much pain, but it's the system just doesn't do it.
Care. It's a sick care now.
Yeah, still a sick care. It's still a sick care.
Yeah. Okay, Swan has additional question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this beautiful presentation. That's a question related to healthcare professional. Currently, all DiGAs are some self-guided interventions, and the healthcare professional are excluded. You've already partly commented on that, saying that it was a question of money, and it's being discussed. But I'm a professor, and I'm teaching to healthcare professionals these new tools that are becoming viable, and many of them say, "Well, we don't have the information." Even though we could recommend this to patients, we don't get access to the data. So in our perspective, we cannot work with that, even though we'd be ready to work with them without any additional money, just being able to monitor patient progress and that kind of things. Beside this, we also have meta-analysis showing that self-guided intervention are little more effective than control. Compared to if you include a human in the loop, there you have much more engagement and outcomes. So I wanted to hear your thoughts about how to change the model to include healthcare professional in the loop.
That's a big question. I mean, if you say healthcare professionals are coming back to you and saying, I have no access to data, is that patient data or um, what kind of data are they missing?
Yeah, that would be the type of data you access in a B2B solution when you're monitoring um, hypertension from a group of patients.
Okay, okay. Um, I mean, very often, I mean, it's brutal to say, but very often healthcare professionals, they need to look at the reimbursement they get and if they get reimbursed for the service they provide. So if there was an incentive for medical professionals saying you get reimbursed for an outcome and not for, the patient showing up in your practice and you listen to him or her and you prescribe a medication and then you send him home or her home. That's not how you get doctors, I think. If you tell the doctor, look, this is your patient, you're responsible of a positive outcome, and we reimburse you to obtain that positive outcome. So really, in the true sense of a disease management thing, if the doctor gets reimbursed for that, I think that improves much of the situation because then the doctor has the incentive to look to be included in the whole patient journey and in the whole care journey much more than he or she is at the moment. And I think that change that needs a different thinking in the system because we are going away from just treating a disease to managing a patient. Um, that I think in the long run needs to be there, and eventually maybe we're coming to that situation, but we are still not there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, partly the situation in diabetes management, for instance, or even asthma management is going toward this digital platform, which has a side, an entry side for or an activation device
Mm,
for patient and
mm,
some monitoring for healthcare professionals. So yeah, it is not currently standard for mental health examples like the
mm,
practice that you cited, but I think it
yeah,
would be interesting, yeah, to
yeah,
leverage attention
yeah.
on that.
And then of course the doctor needs to have access to the patient data, like in a true sense
Mm.
of an
Yeah,
electronic patient record. If the doctor has no idea, what the patient has been doing in the hospital or what he has been doing with any other specialist, then why how should he handle that? And what kind of what kind of motivation should he have to look at the patient in a holistic way? So you have to enable also the doctor to have access to the data and have the chance to look at the patient in a holistic way. If that is not the case, it's difficult. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you very much.
Mm,
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's where recently I was, yeah, last week I was on this uh, health technology assessment webinar, and there was a huge importance of understanding and documenting the patient journey. And they use different words, care pathway, right? Patient journey, and the whole context of everything that's happening around the patient, all the stakeholders, and then as a part of evidence for your particular technology. And I was kind of surprised. I thought this 4 hour will be like 1.5 hours was about this particular patient journey, including also exercise in which they left us with some specific surgical device and asked us to develop patient journey.
yes.
And that ensures me that's what we are teaching as well. Importance of qualitative methods and importance of really understanding the context, quantitative, qualitative methods, and
Yeah.
just really setting up this, yeah, the context and the stage before anything is proposed. Because well,
Yeah.
build it
And I
and
mean,
they come.
yeah.
It's
I mean, in Germany, we have what we call different regional networks. I would say around 10 serious regional networks where different care providers work together in a region. Like you have the general practitioner, you have the hospital, the specialist, you have the
Okay.
home care people. So that is a new care model which is working as an isolated way in different regional settings. So people understand that this is the way we should go. It's just not that there is a platform to provide that on a national basis, I would say. It's rather the initiative of regional people saying, yeah, we need to offer this to our patients because it is better for us and it's better for the patients. So it's really down to individual motivation of people, who bring that into life and get it on the road rather than having it institutionalized.
Oh, so many complex. It's all complex and yes, keep
It's
keep
complex.
going.
It's complex, but I mean, I've been doing this for the last 20 years or so, digital health
Bravo.
and health innovation. And if I look back, I can say what's happening over the last 2 to 3 years is encouraging because finally we are moving. Because before everybody was saying, yeah, we understand the problem. We may have the tools, but we don't get it done. After all, within the last couple of months or 2 to 3 years, you feel, or I see actually things are moving. So we are slowly, but we're moving in the right direction. So that is something where I say it's still an interesting time for me to be there and to look at what's happening and maybe also to contribute my small part to, getting this journey on the road. So this is why I'm still there doing this.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for this positive outlook. Are there more questions? If there's no questions, I let you go. We let you go. We let the speaker go. I would just like to announce that Rainer is, we're privileged to have, thank you, yes. We're privileged to have Rainer like once a year because it's linked to our Concept to Market and Mobile Computing project. So student project, and it's a part of teaching of digital health to our students at Center for Informatics. Thank you very much, Rainer. And I guess anybody who is interested in further discussion on their specific projects is welcome to contact you. And of course, thank you very much for your time already. And to the 2:10, yes, it's time to go. Take good care until next time. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kate, for inviting me. Thanks to all who attended. And as Kate says, if you have questions, you see my contact details there. Just put me a message.
And I will post the links on our Quality of Life website. Thank you.
Cool, guys.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.